Marjorie Taylor Greene has called for a national divorce. So Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for a national divorce. And initially she had said something about splitting it up by red states and blue states, which I think is a manifestation of ideology, which drives me nuts. Ideology is so weak and so projection driven that it's surface level bullshit, right? So she calls this national divorce. She says a national divorce is not a civil war, but becoming a necessary reality because of our irreconcilable differences. The federal government is a monster and has become a weapon of the left against the right. So that's victim mentality. So if we look at that, Marjorie Taylor Greene, as most conservatives do now that are prominent in this world, will play victim. Donald Trump, Dan Crenshaw, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, like this crew, these modern conservatives and Democrats, but we're speaking about conservatives here, have become professional victims while then criticizing the people on the left who do the same. Do you see how this is a manifestation of ideology and how stupid ideology actually is? Being ideologically captured by a faith-based institution, which political parties are becoming more and more of, right, leads to this type of hypocrisy. It makes absolutely no sense. That the federal government has become a weapon of the left against the right is so absurd to even think, unless you're living in a 6-month period, right? If you think of history as the last 6 months or last 2 years, yeah, maybe you can make that argument. If you think of history as the last 20 years, there's absolutely no way you can make that argument. I mean, even when we talk about spending, right? And the debt and the deficit, these kind of things. What drove that? Right? It's two things. Tax cuts and starting a fucking war. Who did that? Was that the liberals? Now they continued it, but that was started by George W. Bush. Tax cuts and increased spending hand over fist for his war in Iraq and then Afghanistan. That lasted for 20 years. That's why we are where we are financially. Don't let anybody tell you it's because of entitlements. It's because of a war. It's because the federal government is completely captured by special interests, whether it be big food, big pharma, or the military industrial complex. Those people are pulling the levers of power. This is not the left versus the right. And the idea, if you're living in that arena, right? If you're living in this is left versus right, at this point, if you still exist there, Marjorie, you are at the surface level. Like you are operating from the most rudimentary understanding of human behavior, of politics, of social structures. You don't have a grasp of what's actually going on because you can't complain about the deep state in one breath and then talk about left versus right institutionally in the other. It does not make sense. But a national divorce does make a little bit of sense. Not by red and blue states, but maybe we can do a national divorce based on principles and understanding. So I'm going to pull up the United States map here. Here's what I think a national divorce could look like. So let's start here at the penis of the country here, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina. That's a country. That is, I don't know, we can just call it Florida. That's Florida now. All of these southern states here in the Southeast. Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, all the way up through Maine. That's now a country. That is now Maine or New York, whatever the you want to call it, doesn't matter. Moving over, we've got Wisconsin, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota. That whole block right there, basically the Midwest, that is now a country. Okay? Now we go New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma. That's a country now. Okay, that big block right there is a country. Moving on, we're going to go Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. That's a country now. Okay, the American West is now a country. Now, where it gets creative over here, where I get creative, Arizona, the bottom half of Nevada, and the bottom half of California. Right, so Southern California, Southern Nevada, and Arizona, that's a country. And the reason I make that one smaller is because of the population density, and California needs to be split in half. It's incapable of handling itself. Now, Northern California, the northern half of California, not technically northern, so like north central through northern California, northern Nevada, Oregon, and Washington, the Pacific Northwest all the way down to Central California and then Nevada as well to get a little desert in there so they can put a nuclear power plant and power all their shit. That is a country. So we look at that and we look at that. Was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? That's 7 different countries that actually can relate to one another, right? I have a lot more in common with somebody in Wyoming or Idaho or Montana or Utah as someone who lives in Colorado. I have so much more in common with these folks than I do with anybody on the East Coast, right? We don't operate in the same way. Now, of course, there'll have to be trade agreements and all these kind of things, but where can we look in the world who has a similar system to this that makes it work? Well, the United Kingdom, right? Like Europe. This makes sense. You can do this. This could be the American Union, a functioning body of 7. That's an odd number for a reason. 7 different countries. And within that, because America has outgrown itself, people like my friend JP Sears, think what you want about him, but he put out this t-shirt and said, "Make America 1776 again." And I commented, I said, dude, I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't know if you understand this, but America in 1776 was basically the East Coast. I think it's like Louisiana in 1776 went all the way to Canada, modern day Canada. Okay. All of this, the vast majority of the country was not America in 1776. So, based on the merchandising that JP has done, I will assume that he agrees with this because he wants to make America about, 1/4 of the size. If he wants to make it 1776 again, I would also think that he would want to have a handful of slaves for his farm and, no running water. But tuberculosis, I don't know. But if you look at this, it makes sense. People in the Midwest, and of course you have trade agreements, right? Because a lot of these wouldn't have ports and different things, but it'd be easy to make a trade agreement with Texas or California or the East Coast. You can do this thing. It's very possible. But then when we essentially force a relocalization of politics, if you relocalize politics, which is what I think is super important, if we can find a way to do that, and this isn't about red states, blue states, conservatives, whatever, it's about the fact that I can understand, right, what someone in Montana is going through, right, what they're dealing with. Okay, I can understand what someone in Utah is dealing with, except unless it's the Mormons, because the Mormons, I'm lumping the Mormons in here with Colorado begrudgingly. Let me tell you, I don't really want that juice, but hey, it is what it is, because within this environment, these are a bunch of purple states for the most part. Right? Wyoming's pretty conservative. Montana is. Utah is and isn't, in my opinion. If you had a little bit more of a rational Democratic side, or if you were still operating in a 2-party system, I think you could turn Utah purple. Even Idaho as well, right? Because the principles of kind of the classical liberal way of going about things, which I think we would revert back to if we localized politics again, is a little bit more rational. Right? There's a little bit less nonsense. And then you understand that, then we don't, because here's the thing, the United States, right? The United States of America that we can be proud of was not ever built to be a global superpower. To be a global superpower is not part of the plan here. What was attempted to be created here was a land of freedom, right? Pursuing happiness and liberty. These are important things. And those things run counter to being the world's police and a global dominant superpower. So what we can do within this system, right, is focus on defense in a big way. But we can also understand, let's make decisions for ourselves. Let's make decisions for what we need here, because we're operating in Colorado on a lot of decisions that are being made elsewhere with people that don't understand what we deal with on a daily basis, right? And I don't think I should be making any decisions for somebody anywhere else, but we've nationalized politics, right? And people in Texas have a whole different situation than people in New York. It's just not the same. So there is this place where it's like your lived experience is so different that it's going to be really hard for you to be on the same page. But you elect a representative for your nation that goes to a council, whatever you want to call it, the government. And we still have functioning governments that cooperate with one another. Now, we can't say, well, Texas is kind of a dick and Texas is probably going to take over Mexico. That's okay. If Texas wants to do a conquest to take half of Mexico, be whatever. It's not my responsibility. I don't, because what am I going to do about it? I don't live down there. None of my business what they do. You know what I mean? They wouldn't turn it all to Tejas. Well, then be my guessed, man. Probably good for Mexico. If I know. If anybody can handle the cartels, it'd be Texas. Those Border Patrol guys are gnarly down there.